So here's a question we're hearing a lot. How do we really get the most out of these large language models, these LLMs, especially now? Things are moving so fast. And there's this term that keeps popping up, gaining some serious traction. Context engineering. We've seen people like Toby Lipke, Shopify's CEO, talk about it. He actually prefers context engineering to prompt engineering. Says it better captures the art of providing all the context for the task to be plausibly solved by the LLM, which sounds pretty comprehensive.
It does, and that feeling is definitely shared. You see McKay Wrigley agreeing, saying things like, all the alpha is in assembling context well to reduce the fog of war for the model. He points out how models are, converging to humanish info needs. It signals a real shift in thinking.
Right. So that's our mission for this deep dive then. We want to unpack what context engineering really means, why is it suddenly so critical, and maybe most importantly, what does it imply for you whether you're using LLMs day to day or actually building applications with them? Okay, let's get into it. Now, when ChatGPT first landed, everyone was talking prompt engineering.
The tips and tricks.
Exactly. It was all about finding those little quirks, the right way to ask. But models are getting smarter fast. And a lot of those old tricks, they just don't really work anymore. Plus, you see UIs kind of hiding the prompting process now. Like, I used Ideogram recently, gave it a pretty simple prompt, fun, retro-futuristic cover for The Quest for the Solopreneur Unicorn, 1950s mid-century modern. And it turned that into this super detailed, multi-sentence description for the image, way beyond what I typed.
That's a great example, because in this newer way of thinking, context is really all the information you give the LLM that helps it get the answer right.
Yeah.
So context engineering is fundamentally about making sure the LLM has the right information it needs. And like you said, it's way beyond just deciding, which document should I upload. It's about the whole informational environment.
Okay, and digging into this, it seems like there are two key aspects or domains to context engineering. They're connected but distinct. First up, there's what we might call deterministic context. This feels like maybe the smaller part.
Potentially, yeah.
It's the stuff we can directly control. Things like system instructions, the rules you set for a specific chat session, any documents you upload, static prompts, knowledge bases, data feeds.
Right, the controllable inputs. And initially, a lot of the talk around this was really focused on the context window. How to use those limited tokens efficiently because of token burn, the costs and limits. There were technical approaches, like chain of draft, where the LLM uses its own symbols or shorthand instead of full sentences to sort of think on paper, saving tokens but keeping the logic. It was very much about micromanaging that window. But then there's the other side, the potentially much larger part, probabilistic context.
Okay.
This emerges when the LLM starts accessing external tools, especially the web. Suddenly, if an LLM can browse that deterministic context you carefully crafted, it can become, a drop in the bucket. I mean, you could give Claude Opus a document, ask it to do some research, and it might hit, 400, 500, 600 websites to answer you.
Wow, okay. That's a lot. How does it even stay focused on my original question when it's wading through hundreds of websites? What keeps it on track?
Yeah, and here's where it gets really interesting. It stays focused because it's been reinforcement learned and trained specifically to zero in on the user's ask. So the responsibility for shaping that huge probabilistic context on all those websites actually shifts back to the prompt itself. The prompt becomes probabilistic too, in a sense.
So the prompt isn't just telling it what to do, but also guiding how it explores this vast external space.
Precisely. It's less about controlling every bit of info it sees and more about shaping the environment it explores to get more correct, more useful, more congruent answers. And from an engineering perspective, this is rapidly becoming the main job. Cognition, the folk behind Devon, put it bluntly, context engineering is effectively the #1 job of engineers building AI agents.
Okay, #1 job. That's a strong statement. And they tie this into the problems with multi-agent systems, right? That brittleness.
Exactly. They actually argued, don't build multi-agents because of this context issue.
They used that Flappy Bird clone example, didn't they?
Yeah. If you give one agent the background task and another the bird movement task, they might misinterpret the context. You end up with like a Super Mario background and a bird sprite that isn't even a game asset and doesn't move right.
Right, because they don't share the same understanding. The final agent gets garbage in, garbage out, basically.
Pretty much. Miscommunications everywhere. So Cognition's idea is this single-threaded linear agent.
Okay.
The same agent breaks down the task, does the subtask, combines the results. It maintains continuous context. Much smoother.
That makes sense. But what about really huge tasks? Can one agent hold all that context?
That's the next challenge. They acknowledge that for really big problems, the context window might overflow. So they're thinking about things like a sidelong context compression LLM. Basically another LLM that watches the main agent and compresses the conversation and actions into just the key moments and decisions. That compressed summary then informs the next steps, keeping the context manageable but relevant.
That sounds complex. It reminds me of that analogy Andres Karpathy used, that Lance Martin highlighted.
The OS analogy.
Yeah, that LLMs are a kind of new operating system. The LLM is the CPU, and its context window is the RAM.
It's a good one.
And context engineering then becomes essentially packaging and managing the data, the context, that needs to be loaded into that RAM for the LLM CPU to process a task. Anthropic said something similar, didn't they? About agents needing careful context management over hundreds of conversational turns.
They did. And LangChain really doubles down on this. They see context engineering as building these dynamic systems to provide the right information, the right tools, in the right format. They argue it's the most important skill for an AI engineer now, because applications are becoming these complex, dynamic, agentic systems. And crucially, when these agent systems fail, it's increasingly because they simply didn't have the appropriate context, not because the core model was dumb.
Okay, so it's fundamental for engineers, but what about for the rest of us, the end users? How does this translate? We learned prompt engineering, sort of. Do we now need to become mini context engineers?
I think so, yes, in a way. Users will get better at understanding what's the right amount of information to give a specific model, and also which models handle different types of information better. Think about GPT 3.5 Pro. Remember how it was specifically optimized to be better at context? There was that piece, God is hungry for context, showing that when they fed 3.5 Pro a huge amount of company info, past meetings, recordings, everything, it produced a much better strategy than GPT-3 did with less context. That's user-level context engineering right there.
Choosing the right model and knowing what kind of information and how much to give it.
Exactly. Model selection and information strategy.
So thinking about managing this probabilistic context, especially for engineers building these systems, it sounds tricky. You mentioned hundreds of websites. What are the key principles to keep in mind to avoid, total chaos?
It is tricky. There are probably 5 critical things. First, expect discovery and design for semantic highways. You have to assume the agent will find unexpected stuff when it searches broadly. So you design systems, these semantic highways, to guide it towards the desired information consistently. Focus on the rate at which good stuff comes back.
Okay, build good paths through the noise. What's second?
Second, monitor information sources. You absolutely have to track the quality of the sources the agent relies on. We've all seen ChatGPT do deep research and cite some pretty sketchy websites sometimes, even if the output seems okay. You might need to constrain its sources or at least be aware of where it's going.
Makes sense. Third,
take security seriously. This is huge. LLM injection attacks, or malicious data found during web searches or in databases, tries to manipulate the agent. It's not if, it's when. You have to anticipate this.
Right. Security can't be an afterthought. Number 4.
Fourth, measure overall decision accuracy with relevant scoring. Forget just precision and recall sometimes. For these probabilistic contexts, how relevant and reliable the sources are is actually more predictive of the final output quality. So score the sources.
Interesting. Focus on the inputs to predict the output quality. And the last one.
Fifth, version everything. This sounds basic, but it's crucial. Those prompts that shape the agent's search. You need to test them, version them meticulously. Tiny changes can lead to vastly different explorations and results.
Wow, okay, so those principles really paint a picture. We're moving towards evaluating systems based on source quality across these huge probabilistic contexts. And that deterministic context, the stuff we directly control, its main job isn't just saving tokens anymore.
Not primarily, though.
It's more about its power to shape and guide the exploration within that much larger probabilistic window, how your specific input steers the massive search.
Exactly. And look, context engineering, the idea of giving information isn't brand new, but the term really fits what's becoming an incredibly important skill. The fundamental shift is that chatbots aren't just chatbots anymore. Many are becoming agents in a trench coat, using complex agent behavior on the back end.
That's a great way to put it. Agents in a trench coat. So, wrapping up, what does this all mean for you listening? How do you adapt? Whether you're just trying to get better answers from your AI assistant or you're an engineer building these complex agentic systems, managing context, even the parts you can't fully control, seems absolutely critical. This feels like an incredibly dynamic area, maybe even more important in the long run than prompt engineering ever was. Definitely something to watch and explore in your own work.